Jenna, a 19-year-old college student, had just moved into her first apartment. Her parents were out of town, and her roommates weren't scheduled to arrive until the weekend. Everything seemed quiet, almost too quiet, as she settled in for the night. Around 2 a.m., she heard it, a faint tapping on her bedroom window. At first, she thought it was a branch or a raccoon, but the sound repeated, slow, deliberate, like someone testing if she was awake. Heart pounding, she peeked through the blinds. Nothing. Minutes later, there was a shadow across the living room wall, just for a second, as if someone had been watching from the other side of the living room window. She called her best friend, whispering, too scared to speak loudly. Her friend suggested she stay on the line until sunrise, but the tapping returned, faster this time. Then the doorknob to the apartment jiggled slightly. Jenna froze. She didn't own a lockbox or an extra key, and no one had a copy. Panic set in. She remembered the security app her landlord had installed. The feed showed her front door, and at that moment a figure appeared at the window behind her. A man, tall, unshaven, wearing a hoodie, just standing there staring. Then he disappeared. Jenna ran to her bedroom and locked herself in, dialing 911. The operator told her to stay calm. She stayed on the line, whispering, until the sirens arrived. When police checked the apartment, there was no one inside. But the window latch was unlocked, and a footprint in the dust outside the back door suggested someone had been watching for hours. Marcus, a 22-year-old college student, had just moved into a small townhouse near campus. His roommates were on a weekend trip, leaving him alone for the first time. Marcus prided himself on being cautious, locking every door, setting alarms, and keeping a baseball bat by the couch, just in case. Around 11:45 p.m., as he was settling in to watch a movie, his phone rang. The number wasn't saved. It showed no caller ID. Thinking nothing of it, he ignored it. Then it rang again, and again. Hesitant, he answered. At first, there was only silence, then a faint whisper. "I see you." Marcus's heart skipped. He laughed nervously, telling whoever it was that they had the wrong number. But the whisper repeated clearer this time. "I'm in your house." He hung up, convinced it was a prank, and double-checked the locks. All doors and windows were secure. Still, every creak in the house now sounded like a footstep. Minutes later, the living room lights flickered. Marcus grabbed his bat and crept toward the kitchen, thinking maybe it was a short circuit. Nothing. The house was still. Then he heard it, a slow, deliberate tapping at the back door, followed by soft scraping, like something was trying to turn the handle. Marcus froze, then quietly backed into the hall. His phone buzzed again. Another call from his own number. This time, when he answered, a low, distorted voice said, "I'm watching you sleep." Marcus ran to the bedroom, locked the door, and called 911. The dispatcher instructed him to stay put until officers arrived. While he waited, he could hear soft footsteps pacing in the living room. One pause, then another. The footsteps moved closer, circling the door. A shadow appeared under the bedroom crack, stretching across the carpet. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, trying not to breathe. Police arrived 15 minutes later, and by the time they entered, the house was empty. No forced entry, no footprints, except the muddy smudge on the back window, just outside, as if someone had pressed their hands there and then vanished. Marcus never stayed alone again, and he never answered calls from unknown numbers late at night. Locals say prank calls happen all the time, but Marcus knows the truth. Someone, or something, was inside that house that night. Samantha, a 20-year-old college student, was home alone for the weekend. Her parents had gone out of town, and she was enjoying the rare peace of her family's house. It was a rainy Friday night, and she had planned to catch up on some shows in the living room while eating takeout. Around 10 p.m., she heard a faint creak from the basement door. The door was usually locked, and the basement itself was mostly used for storage. Samantha convinced herself it was just the house settling, or the storm causing drafts. But the creak came again. She ignored it at first, but minutes later, she heard soft thumps, like someone walking slowly across the concrete floor below. Her heart began to race. She grabbed her phone and dialed her friend, whispering. Her friend told her to stay calm, lock herself in her room, and wait for daylight if possible. Then came the sound of footsteps on the stairs, slow, deliberate, heading up toward the main floor. Samantha's breath caught. She tried to tell herself it was impossible. Her parents were out of town, and no one had a key. The footsteps stopped right outside the living room. Samantha could hear the faint scrape of shoes on the hardwood floor. She tried calling 911, but the line kept cutting out. Her phone battery was dying, and in that moment, she realized she was completely alone and trapped. Suddenly, the footsteps retreated, fading into the basement. Then a loud bang from the basement door shook the house. Samantha froze, too scared to move. She could hear whispers, almost like someone was muttering words to themselves. For what felt like hours, she stayed in the living room, clutching a broom as a weapon, listening to every creak and drip of water. Finally, the sound of a car approaching outside jolted her neighbor returning home. She ran to the front door, trembling, and finally managed to call the police. Officers searched the basement and found the door unlocked, with muddy footprints leading to the storage shelves, and then disappearing. Nothing else was in the house. No one was ever caught. Samantha moved out shortly after, but she says that even now, if she passes a basement door alone, she can feel the same cold dread that night left behind. Eli, a 24-year-old graphic designer, had just moved into a small Victorian-style house he inherited from his grandparents. It was an old place, creaky and drafty, but he loved the charm, and the price couldn't be beat. His roommates were out of town for the weekend, leaving him alone for the first time in the house. The first night was quiet. Eli unpacked boxes in the living room, made himself some dinner, and settled in with a movie. Around 11:30 p.m., he heard a faint scraping above him, like someone dragging something across wooden floors. At first, he thought it was the house settling, but the sound repeated slowly, almost rhythmically. Curious, Eli went upstairs and peeked into the attic hatch. It was locked with a simple padlock he didn't remember seeing before. Odd. Shrugging it off, he went back downstairs. But the scraping continued, growing louder, faster. By 1 a.m., he was on edge. He had just poured himself a glass of water when a loud thump echoed from the attic, followed by a soft knocking on the ceiling above him. It was deliberate, slow, like someone counting. He froze. Eli grabbed a flashlight and climbed the narrow attic stairs, hard hammering. The attic smelled musty, old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic. Boxes were stacked neatly, and nothing appeared disturbed. But as he shined the flashlight across the rafters, he saw a small hole in the far wall, just big enough for a face to peek through. He stepped back. The light flickered. A shadow moved in the corner of the attic. Not fast, but deliberate. Something, or someone, was there. He heard breathing, slow and shallow, though no one was upstairs. He ran downstairs, locked the door behind him, and called 911. The dispatcher told him to stay calm and wait for the officers. But while he waited, the ceiling creaked again, followed by a whisper he could almost recognize. "Eli, come here." His phone battery died. Alone in the dark, he could hear tiny scratches moving across the attic floor above him, growing steadily louder. Then silence. Complete silence. Minutes later, police arrived and searched the house. They found nothing. No intruder, no forced entry. The attic lock was intact. The floorboards showed no footprints. But when Eli returned the next day, he noticed something etched into the dust on one of the boxes. The word "watching," scrawled in shaky handwriting, and fresh. Eli moved out the following week. He never looked back, and he never goes near attics again. Locals say that old houses like his sometimes harbor things that shouldn't be seen. Things that wait, things that watch, and sometimes they learn your name. David, a 23-year-old graduate student, had just moved into a quiet suburban house. His parents were out of state for the weekend, and he was home alone for the first time. The neighborhood was usually calm. He hardly noticed anyone. But across the street, there was a house that always seemed dark. He had never seen anyone enter or leave. Around 10 p.m., David was on the couch scrolling through his laptop when he heard faint knocking on his front door. At first, he ignored it, assuming it was the wind or a mischief maker. Then the knocking became more persistent, deliberate. 3 sharp knocks, pause, 3 more. He peeked through the blinds. Nothing. The street was empty. But then, a shadow moved past the neighbor's windows across the street. David thought he had imagined it until he noticed something unsettling. The lights across the street were all on, one by one, as if someone were slowly watching him from every window. Uneasy, he locked the doors and went upstairs to his bedroom. Around 11:30 p.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. A text appeared. "I see you, David." David's heart sank. The message seemed too personal, too specific. He checked the street through his blinds. The neighbor's house remained dark, silent. But then he realized a faint reflection moved in the neighbor's window that lined up perfectly with his bedroom window. Someone was standing there, silently staring. He tried calling 911, but the line was static, cutting out intermittently. While on hold, he heard footsteps on his back porch. Slow, soft, careful. Then the doorknob rattled. Someone was testing the lock. David ran to the closet, locking himself inside. His eyes scanned the room through the small gap in the door. The light from the street reflected across the walls, revealing a shadow moving toward his bedroom door. Every second felt like hours. The doorknob jiggled again, and he could hear a whisper, low and deliberate. "I know you're there." Minutes later, though it felt like an eternity, the footsteps retreated. David stayed in the closet, shaking, until the first light of dawn. He opened the door cautiously. Nothing. The front door was locked, windows intact. No signs of forced entry. When he checked his phone, there were dozens of messages from the same unknown number, all timestamps from the night before. "I saw you get in. I see you move. Don't leave your house." Terrified, David moved out within the week, but he says he can still feel the presence watching, especially in quiet rooms with the blinds closed. He no longer assumes his neighbors are harmless. Some people say it was a stalker, some say a prank, but David knows someone, somewhere, had been watching him all night. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more content just like this.